Joining us online is Jonathan Schanzer, Executive Director of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies and former terror finance analyst at the U.S. Treasury Department. Jonathan, thanks so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure. Good to be with you.
So first of all, my understanding is that you were in Israel for a large part of this conflict, that you somehow got out. So how exactly did you get out of Israel in the middle of all of this?
Sure. Well, we actually landed, our group landed, we had 18 journalists. They landed the day that the conflict began. I actually was meeting with a Ministry of Defense official, and the guy told me that it was a tense time, but, Bibi's son was getting married in a couple of days. So, conflict would be unlikely. Well, sure enough, 8 hours later, the sirens start going off. And initially, we tried to see if there was a way out through the airport. That was not happening because the airspace had been closed off. So after about 4 days, as we started realizing that, there was no way that we were going to have any programming with this group, we made our way to the Allenby Bridge at the border with Jordan, crossed over, and from there we made our way to Greece. But, there was a lot of chaos, and a lot of people were saying that maybe Jordan wasn't the best place to get out. Ultimately, I think it was the right choice, given that we had 18 people with us, and most of them wanted nothing to do with these ballistic missiles that were raining down on the country.
So now let's talk about what exactly happened over the course of the last couple of weeks, because it really is astonishing. So you've obviously been following the conflict in Iran and Israel extraordinarily closely for a very long time. October 7th was effectively an operation by an Iranian proxy. Hezbollah was an Iranian proxy. The Houthis are an Iranian proxy. The Assad regime was working hand in glove with the Iranians. If anyone had said on October 7th, 2023, that a year and a half later, the Hamasniks would be essentially flat on their backs, Hezbollah would be so eviscerated that Assad would fall in Syria, and Hezbollah would tell the Iranians, I'm sorry, guys, you're on your own, and that Israel would be flying open sorties for weeks on end above Iranian airspace, everyone would have thought you were nuts. If you would have said that President Trump would have been reelected and then he would have made what I think is the most courageous decision I've ever seen a president make in my lifetime, I think that you'd been hard-pressed to find a lot of takers on those bets.
Oh, this was, absolutely not on my bingo card. Everybody at work right now keeps telling me I need to stop talking about my bingo card because there was nothing on it for the last year and a half. But yeah, when you look back at 10/7, and Israel was flat on its back in complete shock, and had to figure out how to start fighting back, first in Gaza, then in Lebanon, then had to start dealing with the Houthi missiles, had to deal with the Shiite militias out of Iraq and Syria. And somehow they were able to neutralize all of these fronts. But I do think that the big moment came with the Grim Beeper operation, as they call it. That was a turning point in the war because that essentially knocked out the suppressing fire that Iran was going to have if and when it finally came time for the Israelis to take out the nuclear program. That was always the fear. Every scenario that I had ever heard over the last 15, 20 years was that if Israel had to go it alone and to take out the nuclear program, that it was going to be Hezbollah with its 150, 180,000 missiles and rockets and drones that were just going to hammer the Israelis while they were trying to get out of their own airspace. Well, when that all went down back in October of last year, and then the Israelis took out the air defenses of the regime last year, I was thinking, this is it, folks. And then you had the Biden administration pump the brakes. The Biden administration essentially told the Israelis, you cannot go another step further. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. And they sat there knowing that Hezbollah was eviscerated, knowing that the air defenses were out. And it was only until Donald Trump came in that I think the planning truly began for this operation. And you heard it from the president last night after he made the announcement about these strikes and the 3 different nuclear sites across Iran, that the cooperation that he had with Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, was second to none, that they worked closely all the way through. Don't forget that the Israelis started attacking on day 61 after that 60-day deadline that the president had given the Iranians. And then he waited, he assessed what kind of danger there would be to the United States. He wanted to assess, I think, how much the Israelis had knocked out over the previous 9 days. And it, I think, was a compelling case that it was time to go in, drop the hammer, and finish this thing off. And I'll just say one last word. It's not over, right? I mean, the Islamic Republic is still looking to land some blows at the Israelis. maybe with the United States as well. We're obviously hearing about the Strait of Hormuz being shut down. This is a wounded animal here, and it is dangerous that we're dealing with this regime right now. But when I look across the region, all the proxies, the power that this regime once had, I just can't see it surviving.
And one of the things that's so astonishing here, number one, President Trump, all the people who misinterpreted him on the left and on the right this whole way, so many people on the horseshoe theory left and the horseshoe theory right who are assuming that he was some sort of radical isolationist who thought that America's role in the world had to be brought to a close, that the end of the American empire was going to happen under President Trump rather than the restoration of American greatness on the world stage. And President Trump has been absolutely 100% clear about his agenda with Iran since 2011 and before. No Iranian nuclear weapon. The idea that he was ever going to get us into an Iraq-style full-scale occupation of Iran was fabulous nonsense. The idea that this was going to somehow result in World War III was absolute fantasist garbage promoted by people with some form of ulterior agenda that I can't quite discern, because the fact of the matter is there are no allies for Iran that are coming to the table. China is not coming to the table. Russia is not coming to the table. Hezbollah is sitting there defenestrated, crying to itself because it can't come to the table. There's no one left for Iran to rely upon. And this is why, as you say, the Iranian regime is in real trouble right now. Now, that's not a goal of the war here. The goal of the war for President Trump is not to get rid of the Ayatollahs or involve himself in regime change. Whatever comes next is up to the Iranian people. But President Trump made a promise. He kept his promise. And in doing so, he's shown, number one, unbelievable spine, not just to the left and to the media, but to people inside his own party who are lying that they controlled the movement that he built, who are lying about his agenda and what he does for a living and what his agenda was, and who are lying all the way through to their own audiences about what was likely to happen if he actually did it.
You know, I got to say, I agree 100% with everything that you just said. But what really strikes me about all of this is the way in which the MAGA movement, Donald Trump's foreign policy, it's like a Rorschach test, right? Everybody looks at him and they think that they know what it is that he is trying to achieve. They project their own needs on this man. And part of this has to do with the fact that there is not a Trump doctrine. It's not spelled out. It's not written anywhere what Donald Trump wants to do in the Middle East. He has maintained maximum flexibility. He has kept all of America's enemies off guard. This is sort of the way that he operates. It drives the left crazy. And by the way, it's starting to drive the right crazy a little bit too, as we watch this, as you call it, the horseshoe left and horseshoe right. They're frustrated. But I've got to say that this is remarkably consistent with what we saw in the previous administration. He started it all by trying to push for the Abraham Accords, for a different kind of reality in the Middle East. And I have to say that if he finishes this off with the Israelis, in tandem with the Israelis come out looking stronger now than they ever have with the full backing of the United States. I've got to say, it does feel like he has set the table now for the Saudis to come back and normalize with Israel. And then once the Saudis do it, who knows what happens after that? But this, I've got to say, it is more consistent with what Donald Trump did in his previous term than I think anybody has really acknowledged up until this point.
And Jonathan, I think that it helps transform President Trump from a person who clearly was a historic figure to a world historic figure, because what we are watching right now is the reshaping of an entire region of the world. I mean, you mentioned the Middle East. The fact is that Israel went from, as you say, prone on its back to a full-scale regional power. Now, it probably already was, but the tiger had been poked, but it had never really awoken. And as Victor Davis Hanson, another guest on the program recently, has said, the sort of idea that you poke a tiger, a democratic tiger, and it gets up and it roars. Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. Israel is the only Western power in the Middle East. And Israel flexing right now, a country of 10 million people, 2 million of whom are Arabs and 2 million of whom are Haredim, ultra-Orthodox, is really an astonishing thing. And what it means for the future of the region is that this region follows the strong horse. If Israel is the strong horse, then it's almost impossible with American backing to see a situation in which the Saudis don't look to get into some sort of Abraham Accords arrangement with the Israelis as soon as some off-ramp can be found in the Gaza Strip. And Hamas no longer has its chief sponsor behind it in the form of Iran. So it looks like that's going to happen in the near future as well. So there's that in the Middle East. And then meanwhile, President Trump has sent a ringing message to the Chinese that if they try something in Taiwan, they don't know what's going to happen. The Chinese, I think, 2 months ago, probably thought if we go for Taiwan, there's at least a 60-40 shot that the United States does nothing, that the United States sits there, does a few economic sanctions, and lets it go. Now, the Chinese can't be quite so sure because President Trump has made clear that if he makes a threat of use of force, there is no taco. I mean, that threat of military force is quite real.
It is quite real. And I do think that there is something astounding about what he's just done. I think just by using the B2, by using the MOP, demonstrating the power that we have, I think was an astounding message. And you see the crickets coming out of the Kremlin right now. You see the crickets out of the CCP. North Korea hasn't peeped. So the whole CRINC construct seems to be collapsing, right? It was a four-legged stool. It looks like one of these legs has been kicked out. Now, I got to say, we need to see this job finished. And I do think that that's going to be crucial here. The U.S. has played an enormous role, but now I do get a sense that it is up to the Israelis to finish this. Look, the Israelis have some tough days ahead of them right now. They are going to have to hunt down all of those missile launchers and missiles and all the weapons that the Iranians still have. And they're going to have to knock them out because the regime is going to try to saturate Israel's airspace, and they're going to try to do more damage on their way out. This sort of feels like martyrdom, right? And that is the ideology of this Shiite regime, this Islamic revolution. And it doesn't look like they're ready to capitulate. There's still a chance. But I do think that the Israelis may have some tough days ahead. They're going to have to finish this. And that, I think, is the number one thing right now for the United States and for Israel. If Israel comes out with having defeated Iran with a little bit of American help, this is going to set the stage for what comes next around the region and perhaps even around the world.
So, Jonathan, final question for you. Obviously, you've been watching presidents for a long time. I've been watching presidents for a long time. This was, by all appearances, a really well-calibrated operation by the president of the United States over the course, you say, of decades of actual philosophy and consistency, but also over the course of months and weeks of planning. Yeah, it did take a tremendous amount of spine. I've been saying that this president has the most solid spine of any president of my lifetime. I don't think it's particularly close, actually. In historic context, what does it mean that the president did what he did this weekend?
He's changed the arc of history here. I mean, if this goes the way I think it's going to go, he has removed one of the worst malign actors in Middle East history. It looks like he's neutered the Islamic Republic. And you got to remember, this is a regime that's been around since 1979, terrorizing every country in the region. This dark shadow of Iran has been cast over Lebanon and Iraq and Gaza and West Bank and Israel and Jordan and Egypt, and on it goes. And right now, the region is looking around and they have seen that their number one enemy, the number one destabilizing factor in the region, is flat on its back and gasping. So again, this is unbelievable. As you say, the spine showed by this president, especially in the face of these neo-isolationists who were pushing him and trying to nudge him in a different direction. I love that he stood up to Tucker Carlson, or should I say Tucker Carlson. I am unbelievably grateful that he's done that, because he's shown everybody literally what happens when you want to make America great again. You've got to stand up for the right principles. He's done that. And I think the rest of the region sees it. And this makes America the strong horse in the region again. And I do think we've got better days ahead.
That's Jonathan Schanzer. He's executive director of the Foundation for Defense of Democracy's former terror finance analyst.